We were treating acute myeloid leukemia in 1977 with 7 and 3.
Yes.
It is 2018, we are still
Yes.
using 7 and 3.
Yes.
What is the best way forward for 2028?
Oh my. Well, there's been a little progress. We put 7 and 3 into a little liposome now, so it's a little easier to give, and who knows, maybe it's a little more effective. But you're right, we haven't really changed the essence of the treatment very much. I think the supportive care is better. We understand more about dealing with some of the complications of chemotherapy, the long-term complications. We're transplanting somewhat successfully, and we've learned to do mismatched and other kinds of allogeneic transplants that help out for people that are high risk or relapse. So I think there's been some progress. Ultimately, I see two things. One is trying to understand the molecular subsetting of the tumor, and I think there's been a little progress in that. It's not been great, but we know IDH tumors now. We didn't know that before. And we can induce responses with IDH-directed drugs, which is, I think, a step forward, although they don't last very long, and it's not clear how to use them in combination with other therapies. And then I'd say one other thing that's certainly interesting is CAR-Ts for ALL, and potentially CAR-Ts expanding to other tumors, T-cell leukemias, and maybe AML eventually if we could find the right antigens. Immunotherapy is a potential way to go, although it doesn't seem as though the checkpoint inhibitors have had any real impact on AML at this point. I don't know, actually, I'm not familiar with what trials have been done with checkpoint inhibitors in leukemia, but I haven't heard any big news. Doesn't sound as though there's anything major happening. I think that understanding the biology is really the only real way of going about this, and so devoting a lot of resources and attention to that is important. The other thing I think, though, is important too is understanding this whole idea of the chips and the fact that many people are carrying mutations which eventually lead to leukemia. Maybe there are prevention strategies. We're terrible at this in terms of other kinds of cancer. We don't know how to prevent cancer, even when we know people are susceptible, except taking the organ out. So in breast cancer, we do mastectomies, but maybe we'll figure out how to use prevention in the future for people that are carrying these mutations at low frequency but with high risk for the future. So those are my thoughts. I think that there certainly are ways that we can hope for improvement. I think the essential thing is to understand biology of cancer, and maybe when we completely understand it, we'll know that we're never going to defeat it totally, that's for sure, but we'll have more rational therapies.
Thank you. Great answer. Now, Bruce, there are 3.5 million papers published on cancer research. 135,000 in 2017 alone. But there's a staggering disconnect between great scientific insights and translating them into improved therapies. What are we doing wrong?
Well, I think probably 90% of the papers published have no real potential for making a difference. So let's reduce that now to 10,000 papers that should be making a difference. And of all those papers, probably 50 actually have some impact on the outcome. It's a tough problem. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of science that's being done, and hopefully something will come of it. But most of us are nipping around the edges. We're not really getting at the essence of what's wrong. So all that's helpful. I mean, people are living longer, and we're making incremental improvements in survival, whatever those 50 papers are, the ones that make a difference. But, the big hope, I guess, in the last 5 years was that immunotherapy was going to cure everything. Well, it's certainly not. We don't understand how to use it now at all. identifying the right patients to treat. We're spending huge amounts of money on immunotherapies with only marginal benefit to most people, if that. So, I don't want to overstate this, but I think that even and despite everything that people read in the press, we really don't understand cancer very well at the present time. We don't understand how to really make a big difference for many of the tumors. But for those of us that are involved in it, incrementally, it's a lot better than it was 50 years ago, even 25 years ago. So, I'm happy for that. But it's still not fun to get cancer, that's for sure.
The fact that children respond to the same treatment better than adults
Yeah.
seems to suggest that cancer biology is different, but also that the host is different.
Yeah.
Now, since most cancers increase with age, this could mean that even having a good treatment may not matter if the host is decrepit.
No, that's right.
Solution?
Well, the only solution is to improve the condition of the host, which is happening. I mean, we have, with 15 years ago, for lymphoma patients, we weren't transplanting people that are older than 60, 65 years old. Now we're treating those people aggressively. We're learning how to support them. We have GCSF. We have better infectious control. People are physiologically younger at that age. They don't have heart disease to the same extent they did before. Their hypertension is better controlled. Diabetes is still an issue, but as people age now, they're actually, I think, in better physical condition than they were 25 years ago. So we're extending that window of time so that we can treat older patients more effectively. We certainly don't deal with Alzheimer's and dementia very well. We just had a patient we discussed in our noon conference, physiologically very intact 77-year-old woman who was severely demented, had a solid tumor which had some promise of responding to therapy, but the question is there any point in treating that patient? And most of us felt no, because the patient was so far gone. But that's the kind of thing we're encountering now with the barriers to effective control of cancer in older people. So it's both physical and the psychological, mental aspect that's really, really important. And I think we also realize that our treatments it doesn't help people that have mental impairment. I mean, sometimes we have this thing which we don't understand very well, this chemo brain business, where we adversely affect mental status in older people. So, no.
I want you to know your answers are very unique so far.
Really?
Yeah. No one has brought up this psychological, mental angle with the elderly, but it's a very important thing.
It is. It's a very important thing to think about when you're advising people to start embarking on therapies that are very destructive potentially. Are you really making overall? Are you making a difference in their quality of life and even if you can add a month to their survival or two? So I don't know. We don't have good answers to many of these big questions now. Yeah.
Fourth question is, you have great knowledge and experience in the field. If you had limitless resources, how would you plan cure of cancer?
Oh my. I think I would fund the most innovative and the best basic science. And I would also fund institutions which are willing to do translational research. And that is, study the drugs in the patients, study the disease that's taking place in the patients. There are wonderful ways of doing that now that didn't exist 20 years ago. We can do circulating tumor cells. We have circulating DNA from our patients with solid tumors. we can begin to understand the effects of our therapy without having to biopsy tumors repeatedly. So I think those are the kinds of things that would have the highest priority to me. And I also think that the one question with immunotherapy is trying to understand what determines a response to immune therapy. We have 20, 30% response rates and maybe even less in some of the diseases where we're using checkpoint therapies. And we don't understand why the 70% are not responding, they're not benefiting, and why the 20% are, and why the 5% who actually have long-term benefit are so lucky. So we need to answer these questions. Our current use of immunotherapy is impractical, and it's wasteful. It's the best we can do, maybe, but we need to answer those questions very, very soon.
I'm so glad you are pointing all this out. Next question, and the last one, is more of a philosophical one, but I can't think of a better person to answer it than you.
I'm a real philosopher, yes.
Offering patients with advanced stage, non-curable cancer, when
Yeah.
you know it, giving palliative but still toxic treatment, is it a service or a disservice?
Oh, that's a very, I would tell you this, I think palliative care is very important, supporting patients in lots of ways, diet, exercise, psychologically supporting patients who are in the later stages of an illness or have an incurable illness is very important. Whether it makes sense to give chemotherapy, I think that's another question, and it's a very individual issue in the sense that you have to understand a lot of things about the patient's situation. Their support structure, their physical status, their emotional status, and their emotional capacity to withstand the rigor of treatment. I think there's no simple answer to that, and I would say, you have to be holistic about it and understand that palliation means a lot of other things besides just giving chemotherapy. It's supporting all different aspects of a patient's life and their life situation. We're starting to do that now. We've started to hear, and I know other institutions are doing the same thing, is to institute palliative care very early, so that the people that are expert in terms of all these other aspects of life are getting involved, the palliative care physicians, geriatricians. But giving chemotherapy or, checkpoint inhibitors to everybody, I think that doesn't make sense.
Thank you so much for all these thoughtful answers, Bruce.
Well, you're welcome.
Your time.
I don't know what other